Today's video, we're going to be going back and having a look at the DC Collectibles Batman the Animated Series Clayface. This throwback was a request made by a viewer asking if I could go back and have a look at the Clayface. I don't blame him. It's definitely one of the cooler Clayfaces depicting his appearance from Batman the Animated Series. Before we re-look at the figure, let's figure out how tall Clayface is. I don't think I was doing measurements at the time that we were, well, when I first had a look at this figure, so gives me an opportunity. Brand new light, brand new backdrop. Clayface stands at roughly 6¼ inches in height. To show you how he stacks up, say, against another figure, best comparison I could probably make is obviously the original Batman the Animated Series figure. Let's put him next to him so you can see the difference in height. Clayface isn't really that much taller, only really by about that much. In fact, you know what, let's grab the tape measure just so that you guys can know. Batman's only about 6¼ inches in height. But really where the difference lies is more so the mass. Clayface is just simply much broader and much big and bulkier than Batman here on the left. The figure comes with the display stand, although it doesn't really seem like it's all that much necessary. The Clayface display base has a 3/4 front, 3/4 back turn, depicting what the character will look like. This is also the only time that we're getting ourselves an animated treatment of Clayface. Still have yet to get ourselves the Justice League Unlimited or Justice League animated version of Clayface, which is a little bit more simplified. I guess to that credit as well, we have yet to also get ourselves a new Batman Adventures version of Clayface. But I think I kind of like this design of him a little bit more. It's not as smooth over. He's got a much cooler looking head in my own honest opinion. But there's the display stand. I mean, it's not really too much to be said for it. If you put the figure on it, you're essentially just hiding the display stand completely. Sure, you see a little bit at the bottom, but I guess if anything, it keeps it consistent with the other figures. After all, if you're going to have him displayed, say, like next to Batman here, for example, Batman will have his own corresponding display base. Clayface can have his display base. But yeah, he does sort of get lost, or at least the very least, the base does get lost when you have the figure standing on top of it. The figure also doesn't really need it, as he stands perfectly fine despite his little tiny baby feet. He gets himself a whole ton of different cool accessories. For starters, he comes with an axe, a big giant bladed axe. Looks pretty cool, and really all the accessories have the molded, drooping, dripping sort of clay, molding its way then down to the shape of whatever object he's using here. These are very easy to swap out to the existing hands. I'll show you those in a second. But he does come with the axe. He does also come with a hook, which I kind of find is the least interesting of all of them. If they had only swapped, say, the hook for something more like just an extended, almost whip of clay, I think I would have preferred that a little bit more, almost picturing him just kind of projecting versions of parts of the clay at Batman. Something just like a long kind of tentacle of clay, I think I would have preferred a little bit more than the hook. The hook just doesn't do it for me as much as an accessory could do it for me. This just doesn't simply make the cut, so to speak. And then lastly, he does also come with a pretty cool ball and chain. The chain is plastic, as well as, of course, the actual mace ball here with all the big lunging, projecting spikes sticking out from it. Again, the arms are pretty consistent with one another. Just to kind of show you, like, they have slight varying degrees of sculpt, but at the very least, it doesn't look like when you are taking his arms off and swapping it to any one of these, it doesn't look like it's just simply a smooth piece of plastic, which just wouldn't make any sense at all. I like the transitioning effect of having the goopy clay turning again off to the smoother end of whatever projectile he's got. The ball and chain definitely is one of my all-time favorites. I really do like the fact that they would go and give us something like this. I don't know the longevity of the chain, though. I don't know why. For some reason, I look at the chain and I think fragile. That may very well not be the case at all, and yet somehow I just can't keep looking at it. I keep thinking that that's not the most secure of chains. Nonetheless, if you want to change out any one of his arms, he only has two after all, just grab the bicep, or kind of really around the elbow area, and just kind of pop it off. It's got a big honking joint here, and luckily it's not a ball joint, so pulling it off and putting a new one on, sometimes getting a ball joint around the socket area can be a little tricky. And luckily, this being just a more cylindrical shape, pulling again the arms off and replacing it with whatever that you want. So let's say, for example, I'm going to put the blade, the axe, on this side. There we go. Actually, I'm going to talk about this. This just reminded me of something. I'll talk about that in a second. Just remind me, just in case I forget. And then we're going to go ahead and pop this hand off, this arm off, which I've always found a little on the trickier side to do that. Some of that could stem from the fact that I'm using moisturizer on my hands. For comments, people have said, your fingers always look really rough. Well, I'm going to try to do a little bit work on that. Definitely don't want that to be the deciding factors, the reasons why you would not want to watch these videos, but I'm going to go ahead, there we go, pop the bowl. This one's a little harder because, of course, you don't want to be pushing on this just in case you break the chain. And there's Clayface with his different options. I do like the ball and chain, though. As much as I worry again about the fragile nature of the chain, I do dig that quite a bit. It's also interesting as well that you can see where they installed the chain, as this part of clay is slightly different. It clearly has a line around it where it looks like it was a separate piece that they added over top of it. I didn't forget, Mark. I'm going back to it. So I want to talk a little bit about the axe. I may or may not have said that at the initial time that I looked at this figure, but I'm really bothered by the fact that I feel like the axe blade is going the wrong way. The reasoning why I say that is to look at the hands, looking at the arms specifically, this one right here. The axe is going the wrong way. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, well, why don't you just simply turn the axe blade around? Okay, well, I'll do that. I think this is a little bit more correct, for obvious reasons, but I do think that this now looks more like an elbow. If you could describe a hunk of clay looking more like a hinge than an elbow, I do think this looks a little bit more like an elbow to me. They almost should have taken, let me turn that around again. I think they should have kept this molded piece as the front of Clayface's forearm, and simply swapped and changed the blade facing the other way. Because this way doesn't look like it makes any sense whatsoever. Turning the arm the other way looks like his arm's turned around. If that makes any sense whatsoever. I'm going to go ahead and take this hand off, because certainly if I want to spend some more time discussing the figure, which I certainly do, I don't want the risk of accidentally damaging that ball and chain. Go ahead and take the hand off the other side. There we go. And replace that hand out, giving us the original look of Clayface. Before I also forget, thank you for bringing that up, Brian. I don't know if I mentioned it during this previous look at this Clayface, the one before that, but I noticed that it seems to be a wear of paint. I don't know if it's from excessive pulling hands off, replacing the hands, but there is this little bit of chipping of paint wearing away on the elbow socket. A lot of that may also be just by simply moving the arm. Like if you're moving the arm, you're probably wearing away, and that's exactly what's happening here. Much to the disappointment of this reviewer, because I really don't want paint chipping off. It seems to be the only place where that seems happening. This elbow, for some reason, doesn't happen as much, but to be fair, I'm changing this arm out more often than I'm changing this arm out. So maybe that would explain why this one has a little bit more paint chipping than this one here. But it's just something that you want to kind of keep an eye on. Discussing the figure as a whole, I really quite like this. I know I've got the interchangeable head there, right? We'll just talk about that in a second. I do quite like the build, the look, the feeling that I'm getting, the vibes I'm getting when I'm looking at this Clayface. He's big, he's broody, he's certainly oozing with clay. Definitely looks like he did from the cartoon. My only apprehension, though, is if we look at the head here, and I'm moving the head over to this side. Looking at the head sculpt, it doesn't look too bad from the side, but from the front, there's just something that's missing to it. I think what they should have done is developed a little bit more of the folds of the clay up at the top. Because ultimately what ends up happening is, by just having the head sitting on top of a rather smooth torso, it does look like this now is a separate piece, which really ideally it is. This is a separate head piece. They should have molded some extra folds up at the top, especially around the shoulder area, just so it looked a little bit more like it transitions better to the head sculpt. The head sculpt is good, but again, I'm not digging the head as much as I'd like to. I'm just going to move this over to the side. I'm just going to pop a picture in right there. There it is right there. I do like this head sculpt, or this depiction of Clayface. A smiling, sinister Clayface. It would be funny if I leave the photo off completely. But a smiling Clayface. I wish that was the face that they used here, instead of this one here. It's somewhat somber. It almost seems like he's lost a cat. He's really sad, downtrodden. I really would have liked to have gotten the more smiling, sinister Clayface, which is featured on the photo on the right. Like I said, the head sculpt here isn't terribly bad. I find, if anything, the DC Superheroes Clayface is one of my favorite figures of all time. You guys probably already know that by now. That is the ideal head sculpt I would have liked for this guy right here. Sadly, that's not the case. He does also come with this head sculpt. This is the Screaming head sculpt, both of which are made of a soft rubbery material. And to change out the head sculpt, you're just going to simply pop that off. Almost a little too easy, I might add. It just seems like it's almost like just the cup game. I've hit a ball underneath one of Clayface's heads, figure out which one is the ball underneath. You just want to take that off. Again, it's very soft plastic. And you just go ahead and replace it with this head sculpt. Now, this head sculpt, actually, you know what? Got to take this off, I think. There we go. I'm going to pop this off first. Pop this on, there we go. That probably could be a lot of the problems that I'm facing. This should have actually sat inside. Still sits extremely loose. Extremely loose. That could easily just pop right off the moment I do it again. But I like this head sculpt a little bit better. It's still not perfect. There's some element to it that's missing. And again, I feel like a lot of it is just, it's too smooth of a torso joint, torso section, that the head simply looks like he's wearing like a mask over top. To the credit, though, I do dig the head sculpt, but I kind of wish that there was a middle of the mark. If anything, if DC Collectibles had simply given us 3 head sculpts, this one, Lost My Kitten Clayface, this one, Screaming Clayface, because he now knows the next door neighbor took his cat, if they had put one right in the middle, the one that I showed you the image of, which hopefully this reviewer has gone back and added that to the video. If they had put something in between, like a sinister Clayface, even just thrown this one, I didn't really throw it, but if they had just discarded this one altogether and given us the smiling Clayface head and this Clayface head, I would be very happy indeed. I'm not gonna throw that away. As for the rest of the body, it's pretty much on par with what you would expect for a Clayface from the animated series to have. Very goopy, very just cool looking sculpt here. It makes for a very bulky figure, very heavy feeling figure. And surprisingly, for the fact that a lot of the animated series figures have very, very thin, small legs and small feet, Clayface proportionately is much broader in the torso than he is in the lower half of him. The figure stands fine. I do think, though, that the feet, this one specifically, just for some reason angles to the side. That would, or should in theory, cause for a figure that's going to collapse a lot, and yet, ironically enough, he doesn't. Irony would be if he just simply fell over right now while I was saying all of that, but the figure stands perfectly fine. Cool. I like that. Looking at the guy's posability, his head rotates all the way around. I mean, again, it's not quite a ball joint because there's really not enough clearance inside the socket to allow the head to really do anything. Instead, you're kind of relegated just to rotating the head left and right, and that's about it. The arms hinge outward, as well as you can rotate the arms all the way around, like that. It does have a hinge on the elbow, but there just isn't really a lot of clearance. There's about that much. Well, you can see it. It's right there. It's about that much. That's not a whole lot to hinge an elbow back and forth. Ultimately, just by the nature of the way the arms peg into place, you can also rotate the arms. Sometimes it does also rotate the elbows. Just be aware of that. He has an upper torso crunch, as well as on top of him, he does have the ball joint, so you can rotate that all the way around if you want. Sometimes the head will pop off. We'll just kind of put that back on there. There we go. And then the legs hinge out. I'm always worried when it comes to hinging out joints on Clayface here, because I always feel like something's gonna, you know, I don't have to say it, you know where I'm going. Legs move forward and back, and then you've also got the rotation and hinge in the feet. Ironically enough, let me just, there we go, straighten out the legs. Ironically enough, he does have peg holes on the undersides of his feet. Never, and still to this day, have any of the figures come with display stands that have peg holes or pegs on the stands themselves. Just get him now to stand. There we go. Just bring the stand in once again. He doesn't have pegs at all on the base. So really, I don't understand why figures have peg holes. Specifically, Clayface right here. If he doesn't have pegs on his stands, what's the point of even putting peg holes on the undersides of his feet? At any rate, I love this figure. He may theoretically, in theory, be my second favorite Clayface figure in my collection. Obviously, the first and foremost one being the DC Superheroes Clayface, which I've probably done about 5 reviews of over the years of doing YouTube. But this guy might be my second favorite. He has good elements to him. Ultimately, I feel like he suffers. The only place where he really suffers is he could have had better head sculpts. I think this one is kind of more my favorite head sculpt than this one right here. This downtrodden Clayface just really simply isn't working for me, but he does get at least the options of more than one head sculpt. If they had given him that one right there and that one solely, I would be very sad. This one I think is a nice alternative, and I think a better look to Clayface than this one right here, but that's just my opinion. By the way, my apologies for not mentioning the name of the viewer that had suggested I go back and re-look at Clayface again. Whoever that individual is, if he is watching, thank you. It gave me an opportunity to kind of go back and look at a figure that I haven't looked at since I reviewed. In fact, this guy's been in storage for the longest of times. But I actually think I gave him a hard rating, a hard review when I first had a look at him. Somehow just part of me thinks that I didn't give him as much credit as the figure really does deserve. There are misses to this figure. Some of the added appendages that come included with the figure, for example, like the hook and the axe, I don't think really work all that well with the figure. The axe is turned the wrong way, if you ask me, versus where the elbow should be. And I find the hook just seems like an afterthought. If they had only given him more like a tentacle of clay, something that you could have him shooting out at, I think that would have worked a little bit better. I think of the 3 different arm accessories, my favorite definitely is the ball and chain. I worry about the longevity, of course, of the chain itself, but for the time being, it seems to definitely work. And I like the figure as a whole. I just feel like the default head sculpt is really the place where the figure comes up short. And short really not being the best word to use to describe this figure, because the figure really isn't a short figure. He's one of the biggest of the animated series releases. I do think, though, a sinister, smiling Clayface would have worked and gone a much longer way versus the very downtrodden, I've lost my kitten Clayface. I think that's the face that they were going with. If they had only scrapped that and given us a smiling Clayface, or at the very least, if they included that as a third head option, this figure would have been a home run hit. It would have been nice if they could come back and re-release this guy, maybe like the many faces of Clayface, kind of like what they've done with the Joker, the Batman, and the upcoming release of Harley Quinn. Then that would be so super cool. Obviously, it would give them the opportunity of reusing an existing mold and simply just adding some new arms and different head options. Just something that you could give some food for thought there, DC Collectibles, as a future release for you to make use of an existing mold. This one is a slightly of an older figure. If you guys wanted to get this guy now, he may still be available in some comic book stores, but you may be relegated now to picking him up online. But I can't imagine the price point on this guy being all that high. I don't think a lot of the animated series figures from the DC Collectibles line, I don't think have really skyrocketed in prices, so you could probably still find this guy for about a $20 to $25 price point, which isn't bad for really what you're getting here with this pretty cool looking Clayface. Today, we were having a throwback and a look back. Hey, I like the sound of that. At the, this was the DC Collectibles Batman the Animated Series Clayface. Of course, like I needed a reason to go back and have a look at a Clayface. Yeah. If you guys haven't had a chance to hit that little subscribe button down below, what are you waiting for? Little small baby Clayface feet? Look how small those are. Hit that little subscribe button down below. You'll never miss a beat when it comes to future videos. Of course, swing by, head over, take just a wander over to the homepage channel. This channel's homepage, I should have said. And just check out the video section. See if there's anything that you may have missed along the way. Yeah, I'm the guy that's doing that. While all the other people are promoting the bell notification, which I don't think really works. Head over to the main page. You'll see 100% anything that you may have missed along the way. And feel free to watch those videos. That's why I do them. That's why I put it out for you guys out there. We're going to have a look at some more throwbacks, so certainly stay tuned for that. And of course, some new products and new figures and collectibles coming your way as well, so stay tuned for those as well. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.